I'm not gonna.
Oh, good evening and welcome to the Chaska City Council meeting for Monday, December 3rd. We'll call the meeting to order at 7:02, I guess it is already. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yeah.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
Welcome. Welcome. All right, Nate, we call roll, please.
Yes. Councilmember Schultz is absent. Councilmember Bowe.
Here.
Councilmember Wong. Here. Councilmember Geisler.
Here.
And Mayor Winchell.
Here. All right, moves us to item number 4, adopting the agenda. Corrections or additions? If not, an entertained motion.
I'd like to add an addition. I'd like to put on that we just have a public discussion of how the seat for Ward 2 is going to be actually filled, since you gave your resignation at the end of the last meeting during other business.
Okay.
But I just think we should say what the process is going to be so that the public is aware, and so that there's as little delay in filling the seat as possible for the sake of the doing business. So I'd just like to add that.
So would that be 8C?
Yeah, I haven't opened up the agenda yet, but whatever after the City Square West. So, yes, 8C. Yep.
Do we need to vote on that, or is that just, we're doing it?
No, I would have included it as part of the vote.
Okay. All right, so I'd be looking for a motion with adding 8C of a discussion on filling Ward 2 seat. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Bowe.
I'll second it.
Second by Councilmember Geisler to adopt the agenda with adding 8C. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Post same sign. Motion carries. Moves to item 4, visitor presentation. Is there anyone here under visitor presentation? How about one of you guys way in the back, tell us why you're here? One of you come on up and be a spokesman.
I think the guy who said he's from the Holy Family should come
Make
up.
him come up.
They're all from Holy Family.
All right.
Come on up real quick. Just tell us why you're here. Come on.
Mama.
I think you should all come up.
Yeah, come on all up now.
Your parents are watching, they want to hear your name.
All you show up now.
Yeah, that's right. The family's home watching
There's safety
TV,
in
they want to hear
numbers.
you and see you.
We're here for our AP government class. We have to have 4 civic duty hours. So we are sitting in on your council meeting
How
now.
many hours are you expecting to get out of this? This is gonna be about a 6-hour meeting. Is
At
that long
least.
enough?
Probably about like 2.
See what we can do.
Well, I don't wanna see anybody sneaking out before 9 then, if I gotta sign slips for 2 hours.
Make sure they start at 7, because they didn't come in till then.
No.
Welcome.
And that's why.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Enjoy. Thanks for being here. Anyone else here under visitor presentation? All right, we're gonna go ahead and move on. Approving the previous meeting minutes. Again, if there are no corrections or additions, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the previous minutes.
Motion by Councilmember Geisler.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wong, to approve the previous meeting minutes. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries. Moves us to item number 7, which is consent agenda items. Again, consent agenda items are items that need to be approved, but not necessarily needing conversation, but may be pulled out if necessary. With that, again, consent. Entertain a motion if there are no corrections or additions.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Motion by Councilmember Bowe.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Geisler to adopt the consent agenda. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries. Moves to item number 8, action items. So we start off with our truth and taxation public hearing.
This is why the students are actually here. Their parents told them to come and. All right. Let's- All right, Mayor and Council Member, the item in front of you tonight is something that we have an annual obligation to provide. So it's called our Truth and Taxation Public Hearing. And basically, under Minnesota State statute, the establishment of a tax levy is really handled in multiple phases. So we started that process back in September. I think it was September 17th. We held our meeting to establish our preliminary tax levy. And at that time, we took the information that we had from the county, looking at valuations, looking at changes in new market construction, things like that, along with some of the needs that we saw going into the future, and we're able to provide, based on our tax levy policy, an indication to the public of what we're thinking about for setting our tax levy for the 2019 year. What happens then is that that number is then used by the county to basically have a statement sent to you. Every taxing jurisdiction actually goes through the same process. So the school district, the county, the city, and then we have some special taxing jurisdictions too, which translates into a notice that you should have received in the mail probably about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago that says basically 3 things. It says, here's your valuation before, here's what it is now, here's what each taxing jurisdiction is proposing for their 2019 tax, and here's what it was in 2018, and then it gives information that if they're interested in making comment on the proposed budget or the levy, that they can at the Truth and Taxation hearing, which is tonight. Now, we take no action tonight. Basically, this is an opportunity for us to be able to provide to the public our rationale for what we're providing for establishing a tax levy, provide our proposed budget for the general fund for 2019, and then be able to take any public comment that we can consider before we establish the tax levy and the budget at our December 17th meeting, which is our second meeting in December. So no action taken tonight other than to just accept any public comment and to establish December 17th as the meeting to actually take formal action on this. Basically what I'm going to go through now is some of the rationale for the recommendation that's being made. This is very similar for what the council has seen before, but maybe new to the public that's might be seeing this for the first time. So the major items, first of all, I look back at the past year and say, what are some of the major items that we looked at in 2018, which really sort of drove our budget last year? And then how does that translate into 2019 and what we're looking at for this upcoming year? So in 2018, we had the full implementation of our capital improvement program. That was something that took us over 4 years to get in place. We identified back in 2014 $1 million gap in being able to properly fund our general fund obligations for taking care of things like parks, roads, trails, those things that already exist that people expect that we reinvest back into. We identified, 5 years ago now, $1 million gap, and basically said that we take the next 4 years to basically fill that gap so that we had it fully funded after that time period. 2019 will be continuing forward with that, and we're reaping the full benefits of being able to keep up with things, and I'll explain some of the projects that we're looking at. Continued utilization of our tax levy policy, which I'll go through. Last year, we did see the complete loss of local government aid from the state. We did recapture half of that through our tax levy. And then we're continuing to look at this idea of sustainability of our services from a resource perspective, staffing and facilities, compared to the delivery service level expected by residents. So the 19 items that we want to discuss is, what specific projects are we looking at for a capital improvement project? What does our tax levy policy say or would indicate for setting our tax levy for 2019? Big new item, it's really the only big new item that we have for 2019 is the addition of a code compliance, a community service officer service added to our service levels, which I'll explain in further detail. And then we continue to look at this idea of sustainability of our services. We actually are just finishing up basically a staffing resource study through our financial advisor, Springstead, which they're coming back with recommendations that we're going to be looking at in 2019 to look at over the next 5 to 10 years, what do we really need to be planning for as we move from this notion of being a developing community to being a fully developed community, and what does that mean as far as what we need for resources to do that. So our objectives, I think everything we do, we try to revolve around objectives that we have for here. So first and foremost is our mission. We need to make sure that what we're doing from a budget perspective is reflecting what we want for our mission, which is to be the best small town in Minnesota. Maintain existing high-quality service levels, limit our tax levy growth to capture only new growth in the community, and expenditure inflation, and that we'd only increase our tax levy beyond that if we had a new service that we were adding, and the cost of that new service would dictate what that increase would be. Fully fund the maintenance and replacement of our vehicles and equipment and any physical assets that we have. Only fund new programs after our existing necessary programs are funded. Budget to utilize a plan that avoids drawdown in our general fund reserve. Fully fund our street reconstruction needs, and we've seen that over the last decade that we've basically every year have been constructing, within 3 years we're going to have every street in downtown Chaska completely reconstructed, which is a huge accomplishment. But it started with an objective. And then develop a long-term budget plan that's sustainable from a resource perspective to support those service levels that residents expect. So when we look at establishing the budget, tax levy, things like that, we need to understand the environment which we're working in. So first of all, the first thing we look at is existing property values and where our property values are going into the future, because our main source of income, or a main source of income, is our property taxes, which is driven by property values. So 2015, we saw 8.2% increase in overall growth, about 2.33 in new growth. 2016, we saw 3.18% overall growth, 2% of that in new growth. In 17, we saw 7.85% overall growth, 2.3% of that was new. And then 18, last year, we saw 5.72% overall growth, 1.7% of that was new. Now, the reason that I put the new in there is one of the things we have to remember with new value is these are properties that are completely new to the community. And so basically, as they come in, if we want to make sure that they're paying their fair share towards services that we have in the community, we have to, at the very least, be able to accommodate bringing those values into the community. Because if we don't, then those new properties basically aren't contributing equitably to the services that are having to be increased because of the additional residents that we have in the community. We do not have any local government aid from the state, and we don't expect that going into the future. We continue to have relative stability in building permits. 2017 and 18 have been pretty strong years. I do think the one thing we're going to have to keep an eye on is interest rates going up and any impact that may have on building. So we're looking at that when we sort of come back at our next meeting and establish our final recommendation for building permit revenue. We continue to have a steady increase in population occurring. I do think in 19, when we start to see this interchange being developed, I think that's going to potentially have the impact of speeding up development in that area. Our electric usage continues to be up significantly, and we really continue to have a good balance of residential, commercial, industrial in the community, and that's really always been a strength of this community, is really having a balance of development. So you can see so the 2018 market values are established now for taxes payable in 2019. So they're established back on just prior to July 1st, and then they impact for taxes payable in 2019. You can see that our overall increase in value in the community was $161 million. We're almost up to $3 billion in value in the community. So we've seen some very healthy growth in the community. You can see new construction made up about $50 million of that value. Existing residential properties made up 3.91% of the growth in residential, which was about 5.9%. And the overall growth that we saw in our market values was 5.72%. So pretty similar to last year. As far as market value distribution, you can see about 72% of our value goes to residential, about 14% commercial industrial, 13% apartment, and other represents like ag property that's undeveloped in the community. But it's a good mix. We definitely aren't just a bedroom community. We have over 13,000 jobs in the community, which with the number of households we have about 10 to 11,000 households, so we have more jobs than we do households in the community. Our ultimate goal is to have 2 jobs per household. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to work in Chaska, but that we have that many jobs here. And I should mention, our comp plan and the future development trends support that goal of meeting that 2 jobs per household based on what development activity we still have to go. So market values, you can see we've seen an increase. You can see the dip that occurred between 2009 and 2012 or 2013. Keep in mind that even though the recession started in 2008, these always get impacted 1 year out. And so you can see where the recession hit, where that dip in the market values occurred. And I think one thing that I think is really important to look at is, that started in about 2008, 2009. It wasn't until about 2016 that we saw the market values get back up to where they were before. It took almost a decade to recapture the lost value that we had in the community. So that was a pretty sharp hit for the community, and not just our community, but other communities around as well. So the market value change is provided would actually provide for an increase to our tax capacity of about 5.6%. So I put in what new construction values would be, because again, one thing to keep in mind is back when we were going through the recession period, there was 4 years that we had 0% increase in our tax levy. And even during those years, we saw new growth in the community. And so, it's to really show that if we're a growing community, there's going to be things that add on to our service level, whether we increase our tax levy or not. And so I think one of the things that we did back in the 2015 timeframe was really establish a tax levy policy that really took into consideration that we need to be equitable on how we look at establishing our tax levy so that everybody's really paying their fair share towards the costs that are associated with providing our general government services.
Why is there such a drop in 18? I don't know how to go back. I can't help you. There you go.
What was that now?
Well, there's quite a drop from 17 to 18. Did we have a big commercial project in there that?
Yes.
That could have been the data center?
I was going to say there was a data center. We saw, I think it was.
Data center, that explains it.
Yeah, and data center, and we also saw a large apartment project at the same time. And so sometimes, 2 big projects like that can really impact it. But also keep in mind it's a difference between 2.2 and 1.6%. So it may look like a big drop, but it's not a huge percentage drop. Oops. Local government aid, we went from $1 million at the early part of this last decade to basically zero, and we are at zero now. Last year, we did recapture through our tax levy half of that back, so it was about $128,000. Our budget proposal this year basically says that we keep in place that decision that was made last year going into the future. Building permits, we definitely have seen that increase. You can definitely see that dip when we got into that 2008, 2009 time period. You see that one spike up that happened like in 2010 or 11. That was either the hospital or the data center. That was the data center. That was the data center.
Oh, I thought it was the hospital that always did that.
Yeah, so we saw one sort of, we were very much in the minority by seeing that type of activity. And you can see sort of where the trends were going. Right now, we're being really cautious now as we look at the building permits. And in fact, one of the things as we're sort of going through, what you're going to see tonight is a draft budget. One of the things that we're looking at over the next 2 weeks before we bring it back to you is where do we really think the building permit numbers should be? Because there are going to be factors that influence this as we go into the future, rising interest rates, rising cost of construction material, all those types of things. We see lots of projects on the horizon, but until they actually break ground, it's a different story. So we want to, it's the one real variable part of our general fund budget that we're ultra sensitive to because the rest of them are pretty stable. Revenue sources, but that's a variable, and so we want to be careful where we set that. So you're likely going to see a change between now and December 17th of the actual amount of building revenue that we budget. I'm thinking we're probably going to drop it about $50,000. So it's going to be relatively similar, maybe a little bit less to what it was this year. Population continues to rise though, and we are at about 150 new people a year. That puts us right now, 2018, we're about 26,500 residents. In our 5-year planning horizon, we think we're going to be just over 28,000. So we're adding about 450 people a year into the community, which is really interesting because the school district is going to be talking a lot about this coming up in the next year. My gut tells me that they're going to be, they have a lot of maintenance needs, but they're probably also going to have some needs for more elementary space. Their elementary schools accommodate about 600 people. Well, if you consider the Carver Elementary School opened last year, and we add 150 new residents a year. By the time they'd actually get something built, we've added about 600 residents. Well, so have the other communities too. And when you add that number of people, there's going to be a certain percentage that are going to be in that elementary school age. So you can see that they probably pretty quickly fill up another elementary school. As far as the electric franchise fee, this is one that we continue to see pretty tremendous growth in. It's really come from two areas. It's come from our data centers that are in the community, but it's also come from expansion of our existing industrial buildings within the community. So if you look up into our north industrial area, a lot of the buildings were built in the mid-'80s to early '90s, and we're really starting to see those expand now. I think at that time, I think the community was really smart to really incentivize companies to basically not just buy enough to build their building, but buy enough land to be able to include an expansion. And so so they planned for these expansions back then so that companies knew they had a place to be able to move to, and that's kept these companies here. And so that's been a strategic advantage that Chaska has had that a lot of other communities just have not had. And so we've seen that impact our electric franchise, which makes up it's basically 10% contribution from our every kilowatt hour that's purchased. 10% of that comes back to our general fund through a franchise fee. So as far as our discussion items in 2019, I've already mentioned some of these areas, but we'll sort of break them down into different components. So as far as the operational tax levy, again, there's three components that our tax levy policy addresses. One is new growth in the community, and we saw new growth in the community at about 1.7% increase in market values. The second influencing factor gets to our action. So the new growth means that we have additional services to provide, or we have more people to provide those services to. Inflation gets into how much more does it cost to provide the same service that we provided last year. And so inflation is about 3%. So those two items, so the 1.7% plus the 3% is 4.7%. If we were to add no other service, new service in the community, we'd be recommending a 4.7% increase in our tax levy. But as we talked about before, the third component to that is any new service that's added in our community. As you guys are aware, one of the things that's been talked about quite a bit over the last 6 months is the addition of our code compliance division within our police department. As we become an aging community, and you guys, I would venture to say 85% of the calls that you guys get have to do with code compliance issues. Mm-hmm. My neighbor has junk in their yard. You know, my neighbor is doing this. This building's not complying with that. They got junk sitting out. All these different things that really impact people's property values and really impact people's quality of life within a community. And I can tell you, after being here for almost 20 years, the most frustrating thing that a resident runs into is a neighbor that they can't control what they're doing because they feel like they're completely helpless. Well, we have ordinances in place to be able to address these, but we've never been resourced at a level to be able to address them other than being reactive to them. And so really by adding this code compliance division, especially as we're becoming more of an aging community and going to be fully developed within the next 20 years, this is going to become more of an issue. And so really staffing at a level to be able to deal with this on a proactive basis. It's not to go out and nitpick people for things. In fact, the strategy or approach that we're going to use is try to simplify it as much as possible. One of the first things they're working on now is to go back and really sort of address our code of ordinances. I mean, some of our code of ordinances are from a long time ago, and they don't make sense anymore. And so simplifying our ordinances to get down to the things that are most important to our community to be able to have some control over, to go out, to give people, so, maybe divide the city into 4 quadrants and for 2 weeks we're focusing in this quadrant, and we put out notice to people saying, here's the 10 things we're going to be looking for, so that people have fair notice to be able to be educated on stuff. And then being able to follow through with it to make sure that if they don't, that we're providing that enforcement to make sure that people are consistently being treated. So I really think that this is going to be a really big positive impact in the community. Now, this is one of those types of things that if it isn't done right could be a real negative because nobody likes to be told what to do. But I think if we can do it in an approach that really focuses on those things, getting input from the residents about what are the most important things for you guys to see the city enforcing, and picking out those the 10 the things we're going to focus on that that the residents say this is important to us. I think if we do this right, I think it can be really a positive thing for the community. That's about $190,000 cost, and that adds on about 2.4% onto tax levy for a total percentage of 7.1%. So our capital improvement program, that's a portion of the budget that now has been fully funded for the past couple of years now. So in 2019, we have $1 million allocated to it. $350,000 is going to go towards street overlay program, and I believe that the street overlay this year is an extension of the stuff over on Audubon Road. They did the south half of sort of the Hazeltine, or the Southridge? I can't remember now. So basically, there's the stuff that's sort of on the bluff and then going north into Hazeltine.
Across from,
It's slipping my mind.
Yeah.
Basically, finishing up the stuff over by Audubon Road, doing the overlays over there. So every 20 years, if we want to extend and keep the life of a infrastructure of the roads in good shape. So every 10 years, we need to do a seal coat. Every 20 years, we need to do an overlay. And if we do that, the road should last 60 to 70 years. Trail upgrades, overlays, we budget in $60,000, so it's $20,000 per mile, so that allows us to do 3 miles per year of overlaying. We have a new pedestrian bridge on our main trail system down in East Creek that needs to get replaced. That's $70,000. We have a landscape wall replacement. We have a failing landscape wall over on Clayhole Lake behind Cooper's, Clayhole number 2 Lake behind Cooper's. That needs to get replaced. That's a pretty expensive one. That's about $200,000, but it is one that needs to be done.
Is the bridge gonna, or that little pier gonna be done then as well, or not?
Maybe. We're still looking at what to do with that. So our emergency sirens, our emergency sirens were, 30 years old. And we've been going over the last few years replacing all of our emergency sirens within the community. So siren number 2, this is the one closest to the community center, gets replaced next year. That's $25,000. There's a number of different things that we need to do within our municipal service building because that's a pretty active building. Parks moving all the time, so we put about $45,000 a year into that. And then the 2 park improvements that we have for this next year, so Cortina Woods Playground and Trail System, that's the one that is on the entrance right along Purple Brick Road that goes up to the high school. There's that park there, so that's in need of replacement and work done there. We actually I can't remember if that park is irrigated or not, but neighborhood parks that aren't irrigated, we're looking at irrigating so that we don't become the standout property in neighborhoods when it gets dry. And then Lions Park Shelter. This is one that we actually bumped up specifically because of the improvements we made with the dog park there down there. We're going to be reapproaching the Chaska Lions to see, they had indicated an interest in partnering with us on this in the past. We've allocated dollars towards the improvements here and want to talk to them about the potential of really doing a more robust improvement to Lions Park Shelter to really match up with the improvements that we've done with the dog park there. And I know that's one that's been a key for the council for the past couple of years.
Bad.
It's in pretty bad shape.
Very bad shape.
Matt,
Yeah.
we're talking about upgrade or overlay on the trails and such. We've talked before, I know, about a new trail or a new sidewalk along Chaska Boulevard on the rail right-of-way,
Yeah.
kind of between like Super America and into downtown and that underpass under 41. What's the timeline for that new trail?
Probably 2021.
Okay.
And that wouldn't be through the capital improvement program. This is only to maintain our existing ones. That has more to do with the tunnel that would be put under 41 as part of the 41 reconstruction project.
Yep.
Yep.
Thanks.
So our expenditures in 2019, the major ones, continuing to put the $1 million towards our CIP program. We had the new code compliance division. So we already had 1.5 positions for our community service officers in the police department. This would add another 2.5 people or FTEs to bring us up to a total of 4 employees within our community service officer division to deal with code compliance. Our dollars for employee wages and benefits, if you remember a couple meetings ago, we actually set the benefit increase for our employer contribution at a 6% increase. And then what we're still working on the contracts, but it's looking like, at least from a wage increase, we're looking at 3%, which is what we had budgeted for and what we're seeing for the market out there. So that's still something that has to come forward to the council and have action taken on. But what we're talking about in contract negotiations and what we actually budget for and what we're seeing in the market are all matching up, which is good. And then one of the things that we also are starting to look at too is the MRA. So this was that pay study that we did last year. So, one of the first steps in that is to make sure that everybody falls within their pay classification zones for the positions. But the second thing that we really have to look at, and I think it became really evident to us as we started to look at the data, is it's not just about people falling within their pay zones, but making sure that they're falling within the pay zones comparable to where they are for years of service. And so we're doing an analysis to see where do we, now that we have this data, where do our actual wage rates fall compared to where somebody with that type of experience would fall in comparable cities. And so that's going to take a little while to do, but I think it's the next phase to make sure that we're keeping up with the average wage rates for other cities out there. So that's something that's going to come back and you guys are going to see a lot more of, but we're starting to do the work now to quantify that. Fully funding our equipment acquisition, so making sure that we're keeping up with equipment as it ages out, and sort of like we talked about before, we would use equipment certificates for that to fund those things. And most of the things in the general fund, you know, our dump trucks, for instance, are, I think they're 10 years or 12 years. So these are pieces of equipment that have quite a lifespan to them. So we do have a decision we'll have to make as we get into the springtime of this next year about our free trial period for body cameras for police officers will end. We wanted to make sure that we put dollars in there to be able to accommodate should we want to continue forward with that. So we have dollars budgeted for that. And then we have half a support position included in the finance division to really be able to keep up with the increased reporting requirements that aren't just general fund. This is all of our enterprise funds that go across the spectrum, which is, I think, an important thing to point out. You know, our general fund, we spend a lot of time talking about our general fund and talking about our tax levy. Our overall budget is close to $80 million. Our general fund is $16 million. And of that, our tax levy is about $9 million. So just over 10% of the revenue that we have to support all of our services comes from tax levy. The rest comes from basically pay for use services. And so that makes us very different from other cities. You know, when I came from Winstead, I mean, it was building permits and tax levy. I mean, those were the two things that made up the revenue, and water fees and stuff like that. But here we're very different where you know, our tax levy only represents about 11 to 12% of our overall revenues in our overall budget. So we spend a lot of time talking about, which is important because it's the one thing people can't choose, where you can choose to use a certain level of electricity or water, things like that. Taxes are a little different, so that's why we focus on it. But it's a lesser component of our overall budget than in a lot of cities. Then all other items would remain unchanged. So I already talked about that based on new growth, inflation, and then that code compliance division, that it would represent about a 7.1% increase. And our tax capacity, if you remember, went up by 5.6%. So that's where it translates into this. When it really boils down to it, what people really care about is what does this mean for me? And so we do an average house assumption comparison. So the average house price in 2018 was $289,300. We look at that same house in 2019 based on the average increase, I think it was 3.91% we saw in the average existing property, would bring that same property's market value up to $299,100. So if you look at what we're proposing for a tax levy and use those valuations, that home in 2018, last year, paid $831 for taxes. In 2019, they pay $871, which is a $40 increase across the entire year, which represents a 4.8% increase. One thing to point out on that, that's average home. I took a look, every year I always tell you what did mine come in at. You know, mine came in at, I think it was a $25 increase. And so it's all dependent on what your valuation changed. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of times, you know, well, people come up and say, well, my valuation went up by so much. Well, there can be improvements that have done to the house. There could have been comparable sales within the neighborhood that actually drove values up. It really depends on that valuation of the building, but the average home out there would see about a $40 increase. And that represents an increase in our tax rate of about 1.8%. So as far as our general fund revenues, you can see property taxes. This is not the entire property tax. One of the things, so we share our property taxes between our equipment acquisition fund and our general fund. So this represents the total share of tax dollars that actually come into our general fund. The remaining dollars go into our equipment acquisition fund. So you can see property taxes going into our franchise fee for electric and gas is about $4.3 million, which is pretty similar to what our tax levy going into general fund is. Other franchise fee, that represents our cable franchise fee. Licenses and permits, we have at about $1.39 million now. I would venture to say that by the time you see this come back in the 17th, that's probably going to be closer to about 1.3 million as we relook at some of that. We have our admin charges. So, I mentioned that our total budget's $80 million. Our general fund's $16 million. And so most of the services that we provide and the staffing we have are outside of our general fund, but all of our services, like Noel's department provides all payroll, administration, which is in general fund, provides all HR, IT is provided through the general fund. So all these support services, administrative services that every department utilizes all get paid through the general fund. So each fund, if they're going to properly support those functions there in the general fund, need to pay an administrative fee to the general fund to be able to support that. So that's what the administrative charges from the funds represent. So you can see a total revenue at about $16.9 million, which is about a 5.8% increase. As far as general fund expenditures, again, it's about a 5.8% increase, balances out at that $16.9 million. The only new things that are in there's some positions that were only funded for a half a year last year because they only worked for a half a year, so we needed to bring in the full funding. But the only new things that we have in there would be our code compliance division, which is in our police department. The fire department, you can see full year of funding for inspections. So we brought in the new inspectors last year, but they didn't start till partway through the year, so we need to fully fund that. Our communications person over here didn't start till later, so I guess we have to pay him for the full year this year. So, so a lot of these represent positions that started halfway through last year that we budgeted only half a year that we need to fund the full year of that for 2019. So where does this put us in comparison to other cities? Chaska has always been very low property tax levy per capita. I like this analysis because we're able to look at what does it cost per person in the community, and so you can look at it per service, but everybody provides a little bit different service levels, but we can always break it down. A person is a person is a person. And so you can see here that out of 87 metro municipalities, we're sixth lowest for property taxes per capita in the metro area. We're at $346 per capita. This is comparing our proposed changes compared to last year's taxes for each of these jurisdictions. So this assumes that they have a 0% increase in any of their tax levies, which probably is not the case. I always throw Chanhassen in there because people like to compare there. You can see that Chanhassen's about in the middle of or a little closer to the bottom, but they're about $427 per capita. So it gives you sort of a sense of where different cities lie. But we were sixth lowest last year. We continue to be in that same position for 2019 with the proposed changes. And that makes us not only sixth lowest in the metro area, but it also keeps us the lowest tax levy per capita in Carver County. So the remaining budget schedule for 2019 would be December 17th, when we'd consider the adoption of the 2019 budgets and also establish that final tax levy. And then we'd also consider adopting the final enterprise fund budgets along with any changes, proposed rate changes that we've talked about for things like water rates or electric or things like that. So basically on January 1st, we're ready to move forward with everything. So with that, I can answer any questions or, again, this is truth and taxation hearing, so if there's anybody that has questions or comments, this would be a time for them to be able to come up.
Questions up here? Again, that's a quick overlay. We've seen this
Many
presentation
times.
and gone through this a bunch of times already, so it seems quick, but it has been gone over rather extensively already from our side, so. But any questions up here, because this is a public hearing? Nope. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and open the public hearing up at 7:47. Is there anyone that would like to come up and speak regarding the truth and taxation? Last call. All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing at 7:48. With that, I would entertain a motion to, do we have to approve? We're really not approving anything.
What you're doing is establishing December 17th as the date that you actually would do it.
Okay. Establishing December 17th at 7 o'clock in the Chaska City Hall Council Chambers.
So move.
Is there a motion?
Yep, so moved.
So I have a motion by Councilmember Mung, second by Councilmember Geisler. And again, this is to have the final budget hearing on December 17th at 7 o'clock in the Chaska City Council Chambers. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moves us into adopt resolution 2018-140, which is a concept plan for City Square West and library sites. Before Kevin gets started here, thanks for being here, Noel. I do want to recognize we have a large amount of people here that are in the audience with us tonight as well, and they are the folks that were part of the task force. And again, I would like to publicly say thank you to all your efforts and work that you put into coming up with some rather unique ideas. So I just want to say thank you to them. I'm not going to parade them all up here and say their names.
Unless they
I
want
don't
us
know
to.
if I'll remember them all, Matt, unless you want to, or we're good. We're good. We're good. But thank you to the task force for all you've done. So,
This is an exciting project.
It's been,
Great, good evening, Mayor and Council. A year ago tomorrow, we were here with you guys appointing a task force to look at the City Square West project. So we're excited to present to you the concept plans which have been developed for the City Square West and library projects, and that are both proposed in historic downtown Chaska. One of the things that we originally set out to do, or you had set out to do in terms of your guidance to them, was to create an identifiable concentration of desirable amenities that collectively created an economic value premium downtown. That was their fundamental charge. You appointed a wide variety of people. We had the mayor and Councilmember Geisler on the task force, as well as members from the Planning Commission, the HPC, the Park Board, the Historical Society, the Downtown Business Alliance, the Carver County Library, Friends of the Library, Southwest Transit, 3 residents, and 2 institutional members, one from GA and one from the school district. So we had a nice variety of people who participated as a portion of that, or as a part of that task force, excuse me. They met 6 times, each one with a specific topic, with a specific idea of what was the goal to accomplish during that meeting to move these forward. And I think probably, at least I was intrigued by that one of the great things about this project was it really didn't end where I thought it would. So it was intellectually challenging from that perspective. It really shows that the task force added a lot of really, really good value to this project. It just wasn't us telling them, here's what you should do, and they're saying yes. They brought a lot of value to this plan, to these plans, I should say, in terms of how they were put together and how they're being formulated for you. Also, we did receive a number of involve the public in a number of ways with this, the task force. We had several engagements. We had a booth at River City Days in the Fire and Ice Bond Spiel. We did an online survey where we had a really large participation rate. I think it was close to 1,000 people participated in the online survey. Then we also did an open house, and then after each meeting, they published all of their packets of information and all the information surrounding their meetings on the city's website so that people could follow along if they couldn't participate in any of those. One of the other pieces with this, really for a first time, was that the city had an employee committee as a part of this, which we felt was important because it really gave the employees who are going to build this, maintain it, provide public services to it, make sure it's safe, make sure that it's programmable, provide feedback into the system. So they are providing feedback loops as well as the public into this, and that employee committee did a really wonderful job as well in terms of providing ideas and opportunities to be incorporated, and I think that we really view that as something that could be carried on into future Catalyst projects. I think the employees really enjoyed being a part of it and seeing how a project like this came together rather than just being at the end and kind of going, oh, how am I going to maintain this, or how are we going to build this, or all those other questions. They were able to weigh in early in on that. We did have a number of objectives for this project. I won't go over all of them, but I do want to hit a few of them because they all are important. Obviously, with all of our projects, we want to make sure that it's done in a high-quality manner and continues the city's legacy of visionary projects. And so we're really excited about what this project is able to bring forward, really creating kind of an outdoor community center, a highly programmable space that can be changeable by season and really engage the public in a way that we haven't been able to yet in the downtown area. That the buildings are complementary to the historic core of the community. The consultants who did a wonderful job with Hoisington Kogler and the Music Inc. group really helped us try and identify how to fit these buildings on the site that were compatible with adjacent properties and could fit into the downtown. One of the other pieces that was very important to us is having the site currently consists of 3 existing buildings, and one of those being a retail center that has a number of tenants, but really making sure that we had an open line of communication between the property owners and the tenants as well, so that they understood what was going on during this process. And so we had, I don't know how many meetings with property owners, individually or in groups, and tenants individually or in groups, but it was rather significant number where we tried to engage them. We brought in translators where appropriate to help us break down language barriers, and really tried to make sure that both the property owners and tenants knew that that we respected them and wanted to try and have a fair process and discussion related to a place where they own or are currently doing business. The other piece that I wanted to touch on quickly was that this was designed to be welcoming to all Chaska residents and also to bring people from above the bluff as well as surrounding communities into the downtown area. And so that was one of the pieces that we worked on very hard. Here's a quick recap of those meetings. We had 6 meetings with purpose and objectives and outcomes for each of those meetings. And in the bottom yellow box that you can see here is kind of showing where the public input process occurred with this project. Kind of the first piece I want to hit on is kind of an overall piece, kind of showing the downtown. We're right here in City Hall. Immediately to the south of us is the project referred to as City Square West, just west of City Square. And then we have 2 library sites that we're considering. One is somewhat to the northwest of us, where the License Center and a residential home is located. And the other is on the east half of the Guardian Angels Elementary School block, where there's 2 residences facing out towards Pine Street as well. The City Square West site plan really tried to break down the site into 4 buildings per se, 2 residential projects and then 2 commercial projects. In this option A, the commercial projects also have residential above them, trying to provide for a large open space plaza paseo area that connects down to the walkway on the backside of the Warner block, and then also up to the History Center and into City Hall Plaza as well, and really providing for a nice large area, and I'll kind of show you some additional details, which really breaks this down into many elements so that you can have multiple things happening here at the same time. These are rental apartment projects on this side. The parking for this entire block is located underground of here. Also, there is some on-street parking as well. From a circulation perspective, the circulation is located down on 3rd Street. Primarily, people would be coming into this area on 41, and this really provides the opportunity to have a right turn in to the facility without really, if it was up here, you'd be going left against traffic, and you'd probably experience some backups here, which could influence what's happening out at the intersection. And then people leaving generally are going to the north. Not that they have to, but generally that's where they'd be going, and they could take a free right, and either continue up to Chaska Boulevard or take another right and come out to the signal on 41 and go from there. So from a circulation perspective, it's really easy for people to get into the site and out of the site as well, which is important to us, whether you're visiting the shops, the plaza or area, or if you're living in the houses themselves. The alternate plan, this option B, which we want to have flexibility on because we haven't done market studies yet, really just eliminates the residential above these 2 commercial buildings, which you can see here in red. So that's really the only difference between those 2 plans. There's not a lot of residential units above those buildings, and so maybe a developer finds that attractive, maybe they don't, and we want to just show both options there. The parking for the site has really been determined by the option A, which is the maximum development of the site. This is kind of a closer-up of what's happening on the site themselves. Here's this building A, building B on 4th Street, and the 2 commercial buildings with residential potentially above. A couple of the little finer grain details, you'll see we pulled this building slightly back from Pine Street to try and provide a little separation, soften the edge here a little bit with residential across the street, as well as on this side, given that we have a lot of activity planned in this area, to provide a little bit of physical separation, which I can show you a little bit later. We also have a little mini plaza here, which might be public, might be private. One of the pieces with this site that you'll remember from our work session is there's about 11 or 12 feet of grade from this corner up to 4th Street or out to 41. And so it's kind of sloping to the north. And so there's grade to make up on the site. And so we have really a set of terraces on the site that step down through the site rather than having one large step down on the site, which is something we originally had, and we modified, there we go. So that, as you can see, it can function as one large space, or given that the elevations are separate here, you could have something going on here and something going on here, which is entirely different because of the grade separation. Or if something was larger, you might be able to use this as a platform for a play or music or something, and have people out here as well. One of the pieces as well that came with this is activation. This is really trying to create an outdoor activity center where people will want to come and recreate and do things. And so we brought in the Music group, which really specializes in activating public and semi-public spaces to talk about how to do that, and kind of laid out a set of little box diagrams showing generally what could happen out there, from markets to game activities to interconnected pathways for kids to play on, potential stage locations, as well as just other areas where something could be happening in this site.
And outdoor dining.
And outdoor dining, correct. I'll go into a little bit more detail in each of these, but I'm going to get up to the library sites quickly here. The task force looked at a number of library sites. Originally, we had looked at this as part of the City Square project. The task force recommended and is recommending that the library not be located on City Square West. We have 2 alternate sites for that to occur, really happening at the same time, or approximately thereof. One is utilizing the License Center site and then the residence to the south, and the other is to GA, as I mentioned earlier. The modifications that we've done subsequent to our last work session, prior to this, we showed trying to keep the License Center on the site. There were a lot of comments about that, mostly negative comments about how those things might interact. Talking with the county, we saw some possibilities of where that could be located elsewhere in downtown Chaska, and we're working with them. This plan really shows a full utilization of that block by a library. One of the things that we have shown in here as well is, because it's larger, that you could also bring some ancillary commercial activity in there if you wanted to, or if there was a desire to have it kind of thinking about how maybe Barnes & Noble's works, where you have a coffee shop or something else happening in proximity to a library. And so there is some extra space in there for something to happen down at the south end, where you could have a sitting area facing south, picking up the winter sun. Also, the site plan utilizes this trail that was talked about during the CIP process, that is coming under 41 and coming right by the site, to create a plaza on the north side, which could be used for part of library functions, for outdoor reading or other things, but also could be used for people on the bike trail, for a trailhead facility, so you could have a bathroom there, a lot of different things that people, besides the parking, that people could use as this is a location where you would get on the trail as well. And so, you know, whether there's a little bike repair station or just air or whatever happens to be there, make it a little more comfortable for people who might be using this as a trailhead. And so there's a nice plaza on the north side, interior one on the south side, really linking it very nicely with the City Square project, which is kitty corner to the southeast. This site as well is fully parked underground on the half block, and there is at-grade parking on the street shown as well. And so between the two, you know, that would be providing into this area block and a half of underground parking, which would be a fairly significant enhancement than to what exists today.
The one real quick thing I'll point out on there that we've had Hoisington start to look at is you'll see that gray strip on the side. If you did have something like a coffee shop in there, to look at the potential, could you have some kind of a drive-through facility on there, which might make it more appealing for somebody to locate in that facility. So you see that in Roseville. There's at least a couple of libraries in the Twin Cities that actually have a formal coffee shop there associated with them. And sort of like Kevin said, I mean, it's sort of like a Barnes and Noble. It's a nice amenity to have within the facility.
Certainly worth exploring further.
We gotta be careful of residential and the lights flashing, that's.
You absolutely do. And so just trying to think through those spaces, just trying to show that there might be a potential there of how that could work. Just at a conceptual level, there's room to add some commercial. Whether you add these other components, we have to dig in much deeper, but we at least wanted to show them in this initial phase as something worth talking about further. Trying to skip ahead to the end. This isn't the end of the project, this is really the start of the project. And so we just are trying to lay out a variety of ideas in relationship to what's happening. The other site that was looked at, really from a secondary perspective, but also knowing that you might need an alternate site, was the eastern portion of the Guardian Angels block, where the school is located here on the western portion of the block. Guardian Angels owns most of the block. There's two houses up on the northeast corner that the church doesn't own. This provides for a library really facing out to the northeast to 2nd Street, really welcoming people down 2nd Street, and also provides for underground parking, provides for a new at-grade parking facility, which is something that the church was very interested in having. They have a lot of activities there, but really don't have any on-site parking per se. They just have street parking. And so that was a piece. We also looked at the technical feasibility of locating a tunnel underneath our street on 2nd Street. And that is feasible. We haven't looked into, because we don't really know the connections into the church or those pieces, or the school. That really needs to be done by the church, but at least in terms of our road, because the sewer kind of comes out from the church and goes this way, and this one kind of comes out this way, so we don't have sanitary sewer running down the middle. We have water main, but we can make water main go up or down because it runs under pressure. And so that is something that technically is feasible. It's deep enough to water table and all the other things that you could do that. And so it's a piece that we'd like to, if this were moving forward as a site, something we'd like to talk to the church further about to see if they're really interested in that. One of the other pieces that we did mention as well, from an action item perspective, is that if this isn't, you know, if we do move forward with the License Center as the preferred location and that actually comes to fruition, the church has expressed a strong desire to do something on their site to make their campus more viable into the future. And we think since they're willing to look at it, that we should even continue that discussion with them, even if the library doesn't locate there, because there might be something like a senior apartment building or something that would add benefit not only to the downtown, but also to their campus as well. And so, so even, I think Matt probably summed it up best as saying, whenever we meet with them, that I think everybody would be unhappy if we didn't choose their site for the library location.
But, you know, Kevin talked about the process that the task force went through. We sort of started out the process looking at library sites with really only the county saying the license center was okay, because it's, I mean, basically the county and the city, we can work together. But we were really talking about private sites for the other ones and whether or not they're feasible. And we sort of started the discussions on the private sites that we looked at, as I was thinking, oh man, they're not going to buy into this at all. To where we're now, I think they're disappointed that we're not choosing these sites as primary sites, which to me is a really neat position to be in as far as a community in these facilities like Guardian Angels or like the Moravian Church in downtown that have been institutions in this community for a long time, and how do we make them viable into the future? I think what this process has done is it really started dialogue that didn't exist before and have opened up all of our eyes to what potential opportunities are there to take what we've started here in this process and carry it beyond just what we're looking at on these two sites. So to me, that sort of ended up in a really exciting place.
We have as I mentioned, this isn't the end of the process by any means. We have a lot of next steps. I've outlined some of them, relationship to City Square West and the library. Primarily on City Square West, really working with property owners, the Models, on a purchase agreement that would include a mechanism for the existing tenants to relocate sooner than later and somehow would keep that space vacant until closing. Also working with the retail tenants on the site to make sure that after the Model purchase agreement is finalized, to allow them to relocate early if they should choose to do so in a manner, in a location that they feel is best for them. Really postponing a little bit discussions with the clients in the post office. The post office is pretty small. We can figure out a place for that to go in the downtown. The clients are busy with their transition right now. They've been part of the discussions all along, and so really focusing on the Models and the retail tenants first.
To me, this is a fairness issue. These are businesses that have lived under uncertainty for too long. And I think as a community, we really owe it to make sure that this is something that we address sooner than later.
And then develop an RFP, and then obviously the financing model for the project. In relationship to the library, looking for a home for the license center is kind of job one, to make sure, so if we can free up the site, that we can do that. Talking with the property owner who owns 401 Pine Street, which is the house kind of at the northwest corner there. Continuing discussions with GA about what could happen on their property and how that could move forward. And then as well, working on an RFP for an architect to build the site, and also the financing models on those sites. Kind of want to, we had spent a lot of time at the task force talking about the plazas and Paseo areas. Very cool. And I wanted to kind of go through some of the slides. We had Hoisington put these together. We had done a video before, and the video as a block diagram really didn't still seem to give us the sense of place and how much space there would be in the general just configurations of the Paseo and Plaza. And so we went to some fixed viewpoints.
Wait, one other thing I want to point out that Kevin always talks about. It's way too easy to plan things in the summer in Minnesota. We don't need to worry about planning for the summer. We need to worry about planning for the winter. And so most everything that we have them doing here is planning for how we use this space in the winter, so it's actually used. The summer's just going to come.
Right. We've got one picture of the summer, so it's at the end.
But it's only 3 months out of the whole year.
But mostly about the winter time. This is really looking from, you can see here, the building on the northeast center of the site back in. You can see kind of some seasonal buildings, temporary buildings that we can bring in. We had talked about creating a wintertime or holiday market down here to draw people from Christmas through the holidays. In the summertime, you could use this for, as part of the farmer's market or something like that, where people could come and sell produce to bring people in here. Here you can see the steps going up the elevations of the buildings to this upper plaza. We're showing a building or a kind of open building there with a kind of a chimney feature, kind of trying to provide a terminus for the view from 41. You see the first or the level gallery shops on the building B. We had kind of talked kind of conceptually about whether there's some artists or gallery space in here, and we're kind of showing that in here up on top of the apartment building, trying to create value for the people who would live in here. Some rooftop recreational piece located in here. This is viewing kind of from close to the aperture facing out towards 41, kind of back into the site. Here again, you can kind of see one of those holiday pieces. You'll see a little fireplace, whether that's that or not. Oops. One of the things that I'll give lots of credit to Hoisington about, they really took, there was a lot of comments about creating things that were authentic to Chaska. And what they did here was created kind of an Adirondack chair that's based on the old brick, what they moved with the bricks in Chaska bricks. If you go over to the Fireman's Park, you'll see a smaller version of this with bricks on it, but really just kind of taking that same look, something that's very authentic to Chaska, and kind of creating a chair out of it that you could sit on, which I'm sure people did during the day, you know, taking a break instead of moving bricks with them, but they'd actually use that to sit on for a while, and trying to incorporate, again, pieces of that authenticity that really makes this Chaska into the, oops, I keep doing that, piece. And you can see the kind of focal building behind here as well.
You know, one thing I'll point out about the Christmas market, farmers market, you know, this is something that, this isn't out of the realm. We've talked, you know, the chamber already right now does a weekly one throughout the summer. And, you know, we've talked to them about this idea about extending that type of thing, you know, having it be throughout the summer, but then to also look at this idea of having a month-long holiday type market down there, which is, you know, it's a pretty European thing to do, but I think is I think they have laid the groundwork for something like that to be able to happen. And I think the Chamber and the Downtown Business Alliance have both shown a real interest in wanting to pursue that.
Kind of looking from kind of this quasi private, semi-public upper terrace back to the north. Again, kind of, you see this building. Again, we don't really have a form or function to it yet. Just trying to show something here, because you might see this as a place where where you could rent this out for parties, but we were just showing it completely glass, kind of roll-up garage door type things that you could use in the summer, but also put them down and heat it in the winter time. Trying to make it as usable, you know, it's a place where during the holidays Santa could be, or wherever would be a place to bring people down to this location.
Have you ever been to, what's that one in Edina? Centennial Lakes.
Centennial Lakes.
If you've ever been down to their public area, in that they have a building that doesn't look like that, but it serves the same function, where it's sort of a warming house in the winter, and it ends up being a gathering place for birthday parties and things like that during the entire year. So informally it can act as sort of that warming house during the winter, but then also be rentable type of space.
One of the things that generally we're trying to do was across from City Square and looking up this way, was trying to have some element that kind of physically terminated that, but also drew your attention and eye into there. Whether this is, again, the right answer or not, we're just trying to show and provide some ideas of what could happen in there. Again, you can kind of see this green space in front of this building here. Trying to provide, again, softening that edge. So if there's activities happening up here, it doesn't feel right next to that building, that apartment building, and so that those people feel a little bit of relief. But hopefully they're locating there because they like people and activity, because we're planning on a lot of it. This is kind of the aperture coming in from Pine Street, between the two buildings, looking to the south. Here you can kind of see that.
Looking to the east. Looking
to the east, excuse me. The kind of focal building here. This is kind of right on the upper terrace. You see a little curling activity here. The seats again here. This other one is 9-pin, which is an interesting game. Was actually in the original city charter. Actually doing a little bit of research on it, it's actually a very intriguing game. It was originally, well, not originally, but it was very, came out of German religion. And this was, the ball was actually the positive spirit, and then you were trying to knock down the pins, which were the negative spirit, and whatever you didn't knock down required your penance afterwards, so the better you were.
That's how we pay for this.
And eventually it got so popular that people started drinking and gambling. Can't imagine that happening.
Can't imagine that.
And so it was in the charter because people started regulating where 9-pin could happen. And so you started to see other games show up, like 8-pin, which was 9-pin but had a king pin. And that's where that term comes from, which was really 9-pin, but they just made one fancier. And then the other one was 10-pin, which is bowling. And so kind of how that transitioned into current day utilization, but kind of a historic game next to kind of a current day event, which we do. You know, this could be just not on ice necessarily, but it could just be the slippery surface that we use right now for the portable piece, but ways for people to play games up on that space, do something interesting, a reason to come down. I guess I do have to explain my sign.
I was going to say, Kevin, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, actually I'd seen the sign, and it was in relationship to a holiday market, and I thought it was really great because it really just said naughty or nice. And I was like, that really doesn't go far enough if you're going to have a holiday market. Because, at least for me, it's like thinking about, especially my wife tells me the story all the time about how when she was a kid, they went up to Brainerd and they have a big Paul Bunyan there. And she's like, I just remember when we went up to Paul Bunyan, he knew my name.
Hey, he knew my name too.
Exactly. And so here's another way that when you go up to see, maybe Santa's in there, and your parents can kind of freeload it, but you go up and your name's already on the nice category, and you could make it as a memorable experience. Or if you're out with friends like me and Matt, I'd put Matt's name under the naughty side, just as a way to have some fun, be out there, a little social activity, but a way, not necessarily that this is the idea, but ways for people to engage the space differently. And so that's really what we're showing here, and I guess I'm half nice and half naughty. So just, again, a couple of different ways at varying levels to make this an interesting space for people. One of the other pieces, this isn't a Lexus to Remember commercial, but we saw an opportunity between the buildings. This is on 3rd Street, where you could invite, whether it's the Boy Scouts or somebody else down, to have Christmas tree sales. Would be another way to bring people down, and you know, you can just see the Christmas tree being loaded on the car to disappear. This isn't a forest of trees being planted. It's just a holiday event. Again, a different way to bring people down to the space on a nightly basis to engage what's happening there. Out from 41, really, we wanted to make sure that this said Chaska. And so, that's what we did.
You know,
It screams it.
where this idea came from was actually in Boston. In one of their public plaza areas, that they actually had Boston spelled out in big letters like this, and it really became sort of an attraction for people to go to in a public space, and quite, I mean, it's eye-catching when you're driving down 41 too. It's how do you draw people's eyes back into it?
I think another,
That this could not just be a holiday, it wouldn't necessarily just need to be a holiday piece. You could have this with the changeable lights, so you could do it all year with different activities, just kind of like we do the pavilion currently at Fireman's Wharf.
I think another thing that we talked about is, another way that people interact with Place now is through Instagram and selfies and that kind of thing. And so we talked about what is that kind of iconic selfie moment that maybe this space could provide. And so this is an example of, one way that maybe you could create that.
Did you say
But it-
changeable colors?
Yep.
The color ideas, though,
Like kind of the state
you know,
box
having
thing.
like the stage that we have out there, and if it's a Vikings game and it's purple, and if it's Christmas time it's red and green, or it's it's St. Patrick's Day and it's green, that it gives you ways to change so that people are always noticing that change that's there.
That's cool. Plus this new play equipment.
So here's the summer picture. This is looking really from building C towards D, showing that there's generous rooms adjacent to the building, so if there were restaurants located there, you could have outdoor seating on the inside of this courtyard, which would provide protection from 41 and really continue to activate the plaza space, which is in and around this. You can kind of see that we're showing it on the building to the south and kind of wrapping as well into that courtyard or facing out towards 41. Not that it has to be any of these places, but that these places are sized to accommodate that, but still allow for people to move through and other events to happen in and around them as well.
When Kevin talked, the only way that this space works is if we actively program it. And so one of the things that we wanted to be sort of deliberate about when we were putting a description down here is really sort of an outside community center. The community center is a fantastic building, but if it wasn't programmed, I mean, you'd still get people that would come and use the pool, and you'd still get people that come for open skate or open basketball, but the thing that really adds vibrancy to that building is the fact that, there's dance classes in the auditorium, or there's, parties with characters that happen in the community room, or there's craft things that go on in the wet or dry craft rooms. It's those activities that are programmed there that really bring the people. And, I think what Music Inc. Group has done is really sort of create a vision for what that could be. But I think it's really important to understand that if we're going to do this right, we have to use this as programmable space. And that we need to look at this as an area that we have to actively program on an ongoing basis.
So that's all that I have for you. I know that there's people from the task force here, and if any of them want to add anything.
No one has anything to say?
Ah, there we
Oh,
go.
no.
Ferris wheel. I bet you have a picture of it, don't you?
No. I'm Greg Swan. I live at 106 Pine Street. I'm a City Square West Task Force member, and I just want to say thank you to the City Council for the opportunity for us to get to work together on this program. Huge thanks to the city staff and the employee committee and the consultants, HKGI, and just the task force members. And I think you can see here, like, great care has been taken for the existing business owners, for the legacy of historic downtown Chaska, and this block for the neighbors and the stakeholders that are there, which is really cool. As a downtown resident, I can just share, we're really, really excited about this. With the momentum that we have seen with Fireman's Park and the traffic coming down and the programming there and the curling center and the international attention on Chaska, we're excited about more things to do downtown, more residents with expendable income moving down here, and more reasons to come downtown. That is awesome. And all of this just fuels more reasons why Chaska is and will continue to be the best small town in America. So, no matter, we have lots of work left to do defining what's happening there, and excited to have Musicant, maybe Artscape, et cetera, figure out what that is, whether it's a winter market or a Ferris wheel in the summer, artist housing or other programming. I think that's really good. But no matter the specific tenants or experiences, this plan is really an investment in our community, and I think it'll pay dividends for generations to come.
Oh, me too.
Thanks.
Very good.
Thank you, sir.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
I knew you'd get that Ferris wheel in there.
Here's your report.
I think it should be on the rooftop or something.
That was the interesting thing about this whole process is, we were bound to determine that library was gonna be part of this process, and out of it, we determined that's probably the worst possible place for it. And that's where ideas like a Ferris wheel came up that brought us into, things that we saw tonight that, you never thought would be available for downtown. I mean, so I thought it was interesting how in the 6 or 8 meetings that we had, that we could take and start with what's currently standing to come up with something that looks like this. So I thought it's really the first time I was part of one of these task force that we took this on like this. And it was interesting because people didn't always agree on things, and we might have to change some people's thinking sometimes.
Who are you looking at?
But that was the good part, is because everyone had a different idea how you looked at things. And until you really heard someone else's thoughts and ideas, it didn't make sense. And then you go, oh, that makes perfect sense. So I think it was a great mix of people. And again, thank you to all of the people that were part of it, because I thought it was a neat process.
I'd like to echo that, too.
To see what the results are. This is the first time we're all seeing these pictures. So that, because me personally, I've worried that this is a lot of open space, and what do we do with it, and how are we gonna utilize it? And this shows some of the, just really ground, or maybe it's at 50,000 foot level at this point, to see what something like this could look like.
A lot of
So that
exciting
extra time
potential.
between your work session and now really allowed us to take all those comments that we heard from the last task force work session and really try and flesh out some of that, really try and understand what we were hearing, which is this too small, too big, and try and figure out ways to illustrate that and show that to you in a way that you could understand it and agree with it or not, but at least be cognizant of what could happen there and provide direction to us. Because again, this isn't the end, this is really the beginning, and we'll continue to refine all of these things as we move forward. But we just wanted to take this as an opportunity to show how you could use this in the wintertime. Not that this is the answer, it's an answer to how you could use it. And there probably still are a lot of great ideas that can bubble up, and whether in the end I'm naughty or nice, we'll find out. But
I think it's also important to point out that, Kevin talked about how there hasn't been a market study done on this. I think it's important to recognize that part of Hoisington's team was a developer, and a developer that's actually worked in the western suburbs who has done really nice projects. And Art Space as a development group who have been directly involved. And as we've gone through this process, we haven't hesitated to, as we've seen development groups come through the city, sit down and talk with them about this to gather input from them. To me, when I look at this and I hear the conversations we've had with developers, I think the idea is very feasible. I think a market study, what that's going to do is it's going to boil down to how many exact units can this support? Do we have to phase this? How much square footage of restaurant can be supported? how much square footage of retail can be, it's not, I don't feel like going into this, it's a stretch to do this. To me, the question is, how is the market gonna dictate how this is implemented? And I think that's gonna be a big part of the RFP process that we go through now, of getting this out there, is starting to define what is, how are developers gonna view this? And I don't think, and I had mentioned this when we were talking about budgets earlier, I don't think that we could have done a project like this without first doing a catalyst project like that. Because people have a very different view, developers in the outside community and the community in general have a very different view of downtown Chaska now than they did 3 years ago. And, you know, Kevin and I have been sitting here for 20 years, and, you know, 17 of those years, it's like, how do we get people to view downtown as a place that is a desirable destination place? And I really feel like we're sort of at the point now where we've created enough tailwind behind us that now it's being able to be a little bit more picky about being able to say, these things are really important to us, and if we're going to invest time and energy and dollars in the public good into this, we need to see certain things accomplished from it. And that's a really good position for us to be in a community, and one that we really haven't been in before. At least not for years and years and years.
And there's so many things that are falling into place too, like that the post office doesn't need as big a building, that we need more underground parking, so we can establish that. That we want the library to be downtown, it needs to be bigger. How are we gonna accomplish that? And also with the finishing of 41 through downtown, all kind of coming together at the same time this is pulling together. So it's kind of cool to see all those pieces just starting to fall. But these guys do such a great job, Hoyzington. You bring it to life. You kind of put us in the picture, even Kevin is in the picture.
Hey, we have to work with these guys. Don't pump it up too much.
No, I don't want to. Yeah. Hush. No, but you really bring it to life, and I think that just brings more ideas and spawns more ideas. And I'm still trying to figure out where we're going to put the Ferris wheel, though.
It'll fit there.
It'll fit there.
And I think we cannot forget, you know, we look tonight at the building permit revenue and our market values and everything that happened between 2009 and 2013. Everything went like this. And don't forget what this group up here decided to do during that time period was to go through a planning process to say, when the market comes back, this is what we want our downtown to be, and we want to be ready for that. And the downtown master plan that Hoyzington helped us with at that point really has become a checklist for us to be able to go through and not have to recreate, you know, to know where we're going to put our efforts into. And so I think huge kudos to the leaders that were here and, you know, in that time period that viewed that let's not sit here and just wait for the economy to come back. Let's be ready when it comes back to be able to act on something.
Plus, you kind of create your own economy.
Yeah,
within
you
own
create
town.
your own destiny.
That's right.
Yeah, I was here, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was here back in some of the first planning processes for the commitment to community and also the original downtown master planning task force. And it was kind of interesting. I think Greg was on that same committee too, and it's that same task force. And we came across like a lot of the things that we talked about then are the same things we talk about now. That's about programming, activation, but creating spaces where those things can happen. So this is, you know, just taking that like 20 steps further, and it's really kind of getting, you know, it's just building upon that. And now even to be able to see like these renderings tonight, it's kind of like just bringing that to life. You know, much more so than any block diagram could, because it really added that texture to say, okay, you know what, this is really what it could look like. But even more so, it's like, you know, kind of taking those downtown thoughts beyond what we were talking about 10 years ago, was that when you look at any redevelopment site, there's always an afterglow or a halo of what's next door, right, to those sites. And as a catalyst site, this is so critical because, you know, once this gets built and it gets populated and it gets activated, then the neighboring properties suddenly become much more valuable too. Hey, you know, because we're right across the street from that. And then those property owners become much more excited about saying, how can I reinvest? Because now I'm getting able to get better property values and better, higher rent that, you know, I can like reinvest and, you know, make my properties better and upgrade those. And that's where it gets really exciting, because now we have 2 properties and then a third that's gonna be where the library goes, that's starting to create pieces where the momentum will start catching up, or not catching up, the momentum will start building to a point where we don't have to do it. It kind of goes on its own, and that's where it starts getting really exciting. So, you know, in terms of a catalyst site, some of those things we identified back in those planning sessions were really, really starting to come to life. So this is incredibly exciting from that perspective to see this all
Such a fun
happening.
group too to work with. Everybody out there was so much, such ideas flowing. Everybody spoke up and shared, and it was a great task force to be on. Thank you.
You know, one more thing I forgot, and I'm thinking of Bob Repke in my mind when I'm thinking this. We wouldn't be talking about any of this unless the flood control project would have been built. So we can't ever forget that none of the discussions in downtown would have ever happened if that flood control levee would have been built. So that that was the infrastructure that gave us the ability to even have these discussions.
And I think what it's really done is created a lot of partnerships that we thought we've had a partnership, but we really didn't have a partnership till we started talking about the use of land or purchasing land or whatever, that we talked to the 4 or 5 different potential library sites now, like we talked about, that would be disappointed now that they're not going to be chosen, but that if we pick this site, then this has to move, and now where does that go? And it's all of the fingers that start branching out of this project that really, when you start thinking about it, it's kind of crazy about all the things that could happen, good things.
It's a very transformative project.
Huge.
In terms of the downtown area. It really, as great as Fireman's Park is, this is more connected to the downtown fabric. And has the ability to really impact the surrounding area much more substantially.
Yep.
So I think that's one of the great things about this particular block, and one that I think myself and I believe the task force was really excited about working on.
Okay.
There's so many moving pieces and they all interact.
I think too, it creates a kind of winter activities where Fireman's Park is more summer activities, and even though there's some winter, but I mean, this could be,
This will be a great summer place, but really making sure
Yes.
that this is a place that people want to be year-round.
so it keeps activity
So
down there
it keeps
even in the winter.
activity.
Yep.
Having the library just diagonal to it just reinforces that, so
Exactly.
that, you know, you
I
can
love that.
have some connectivity there. It all, I think, really powerfully changes this part of
Absolutely.
downtown.
Can I add just one last thing? You know, like we talk about development a lot of new projects as in terms of financial numbers, in terms of market studies and research and dollars and brick and mortar and all of the technical pieces. And, you know, those are really important, really, really important things. But very few opportunities like this not just define the redevelopment in a technical perspective of adding more units, of adding more headcount, adding more, retail space and square footage, but very few of them help to redefine the soul or the spirit of a community. And this is one of those opportunities that does. And that's probably why this is probably one of the most important ones we'll do in probably the next decade at least.
So to that end, we're asking you to adopt a resolution approving the concept plan for City Square West, the 2 alternate library sites, and authorize the staff to move forward with the next steps for City Square West and the library sites as identified in the staff report.
Make a motion?
That's a lot of mouthful.
Gotta go
You can
find
say
it
what
on
I
there.
so moved.
Just say so moved?
Yeah, what he said.
And when he said so moved?
So moved.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay, so I have a, so I have a motion by Councilmember Long and second by Councilmember Bo.
Yes.
To adopt a resolution approving the concept plans for City Square West, 2 alternate library sites, authorize staff to move forward with next steps for City Square West and library sites as identified above staff report. See, I heard everything you said.
You did.
Easy for you to
God, it
say.
was right there on paper. I've been in trouble.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, before, so we have a motion and second here. And so I'm gonna move in that we kind of missed the opportunity, kind of jumped at us. If there's anybody else out here in the audience that did want to have an opportunity, I think I can do that legally here.
Oh, sure.
If there's anyone else that wanted to say something regarding this, I just want to open that up. I know that there's other folks out here that maybe did or didn't. So, anyone? All right, not seeing anyone move, we're gonna go ahead with that. So we have a motion and a second. I don't know, is there any further discussion from up here? Again, it's a concept plan. We're just now starting to explore what we can do here as we move into the future.
You know, I would just echo what's already been said. Thanks so much to everyone for the effort, for the passion, for the ideas that have come in. And I'm especially pleased that libraries is a part of this discussion because that's been such an integral part of this whole project and the potential all along. So it's been a great group.
Heidi told us right away, I don't want that library in there, move it. There we are, just like that.
That's right.
She said, you move it or else we don't do the library.
That's right. So we're gonna quit programming. All right, further discussion up here. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thanks, folks.
Next step.
Appreciate it.
Very good.
Unless you guys are all hanging around.
Well,
How about you guys in the back? Did you learn anything? I know you're running out of time.
They still got 15 minutes yet, though.
We have one more thing. We
I
have
know.
one more thing.
No, I know we got one more thing.
okay.
But I know they gotta leave at 9, so I don't wanna be in the middle of it.
They're gonna take this opportunity to blend in with the crowd.
That's right.
Exactly. We're watching now.
Man, oh, man.
Oh,
I'm worried
all
about
right.
you.
So nobody wants to talk about if you learned anything? Did you learn something?
Anything.
Okay.
All right.
That was all worthwhile.
What'd they say?
They said we had a real good time.
And if you gotta go, just go. I know that you got 15 minutes, but go, if you gotta go. All right, we're gonna move on to 8C, which is a discussion about, how we're gonna, what the process is gonna be for, filling of Ward 2 seat.
I brought it up because Mr. Bowe gave his tentative resignation at the end of the last meeting we were in. And
Yes.
so, but now there's going to be a recount, so.
There is.
I was going to actually put it on the agenda, but thought we should just at least discuss it so that the public knows how this works, how it's going to happen. And my thought is that I understand the new council will decide whether it's a special election or an appointment, but at the same time, my biggest concern is not having that seat be empty any longer than necessary, because it's very difficult to conduct city business when you have an empty seat, because then it ties the hands of everybody has jobs. If you can't get here, you're late, you can't pay the bills, you can't have the meeting, you're postponing. So it should be at least, I'm thinking, that after the results of the recount are confirmed, which should be this week, actually, right?
Yeah, it takes place Thursday, starting at 8:30 a.m. And
That's what I
I'm not sure how long the process will take,
Yeah,
but it begins on Thursday,
fairly quickly.
I would imagine.
Yeah, we did the Coleman Franklin one within a day.
There were a couple more votes in that one, so.
Yeah, we did find some, so, but, my thought is that I would like to see, at least from my perspective, having, once the recount is confirmed, and we have a resignation date already in place, that we authorize staff to go ahead and at least pull the trigger for looking for applications, should it become an appointment. And if it ends up being a special election, those same people can still fill out an affidavit of candidacy for it. So I'm thinking that would save so much time over how many meetings would be missed. A special election could actually push things out all the way to May. So you'd be operating with 4 people until May. If you were prepared to do an appointment based on whatever the next council decides to do, you could have someone in that seat by the second meeting in January or first meeting in February. but the longer you go, it's very difficult on the city and on city staff trying to do the city's business with 4 people. You also end up in a position where if there was a 2-2 tie, it puts it on the mayor to have to break ties. So that too is an awkward position to put him in. So what I'm thinking is that, see if you agree, that we should at least, after the recount, then we'll know if we should even do it, but at least put it out there, at least start advertising the fact there is going to be a vacancy, let people at least apply for it. Then if it ends up as an appointment, you're a step ahead of the game. And if it ends up being a special election, they can just turn around and sign up that way. But I just don't want to see a lot of time lost, especially with special elections. Most people think, we can just do that in a month. No, it could take as much as May. That's a long time to sit here with 4 people. And so that's why I wanted to bring it up, and that I think we should at least have a plan to prevent that stress being put on the council and on the city. So there you go.
Well, I like the thought of that we start the thought process about it, but we wouldn't be doing anything till the 17th. So I'm not overly concerned because that's the week of Christmas and New Year's, that people aren't gonna be putting any thoughts into that. I mean, to me, we're gonna have that first meeting in January, and that first meeting in January is probably gonna be where we have to make that decision and to go, whether it's gonna be a special election or it'll be an appointment.
But the process could be started
But
sooner.
I
with
hate to
advertising
start the
that there's a
process if that's not what
vacancy.
we're gonna do. I just think that gives a false sense of what we're trying to accomplish. That's what I worry about. So if it was a month or a month and a half, I'm on board with you. But 2 weeks over Christmas, I'm not gonna be in favor of starting anything then until the first of the year. I mean, that's my opinion.
Okay. Well, I just thought I'd bring it up because I'll be curious to see how long it stays vacant. I just don't want to see that happen. It's
Yeah,
just very difficult on a city and on a council to have, anybody put in a position of always having to break a tie or we've had absences and pretty close to not being able to hold a meeting sometimes, so.
So here's another hypothetical question too, to also temper the discussion. If we had a bunch of applicants, but we didn't feel like any of the applicants were qualified, hypothetically, if it was something that was an application process, would we have to choose one of them?
The answer is no.
Okay, so we could, even so,
That's great.
It's just like any other job application process that you can re-advertise for. There's no specific timeline set by statute. It just says that if it's after a certain point, it becomes an appointment unless you decide to do a special election.
Correct.
It defers to an appointment unless you physically decide to pass by ordinance a special election. So once you go down the route of appointment, there's nothing saying that you have to, if you didn't feel somebody, or you could run into a situation where nobody applies. I mean, I don't know.
That's a concern. One person applies, but you still have to hold the election.
Well, but even in
No,
an
no, in an
appointment
appointment
process, you
Right.
could have nobody or one person apply,
Right.
and just because a person applies doesn't mean that
They're going to get it
there's
automatically.
no statutory obligation to do that. You could reapply,
Correct.
or
Put it out,
Repost or whatever.
put it out there again.
Yeah, and,
Yep.
and it's likewise with an election, you can hold an election, no one chooses to run too,
Yep.
at which point then you're,
Yep.
okay.
Because my thought was we actually should have done this in connection with the resignation so that we could decide here if we thought it would be best to go ahead and at least publicize it. Because I don't know that everybody's aware. A lot of people are, but we don't know how the recount's gonna come out. Hopefully still in your favor.
That's a wrinkle that, you know, we weren't really anticipating, I think,
Yeah.
at this point.
When did they announce that? I just saw it today.
2 days, 3 days
I
ago?
heard
Yeah.
probably about
4
a
days
week
ago.
ago, I'd
Yeah.
say.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then they first said the 3rd, and then they said, now said the
Yeah, so it's the
7th
6th
or
now.
something, 6th, yeah.
Thursday.
So, but it's one of those things where you just don't, you kind of got to, especially over winter, you got to get the ball rolling. So even if it's a special election, as history has shown, almost nobody shows up for those anyway, so, to vote, so. But the longer you wait, the longer the seat is empty, and that's just a concern I have. I don't want to see the city not be able to do its business. It's a very unique situation that we're in up here, so, or that the city's in. But I'm just concerned for the city, that's all. But we don't drag our feet, so. And I'd like to be consistent too, but that's not gonna be up to me. But I think publicizing at least for people to start thinking about whether they want to or not.
I think it's fair, though, that, you know, assuming that the recount's successful in Greg's favor, that, you know, the position will be open one way or another. So, you know, someone who has an interest should think that they would prepare to either apply or run, right?
Right.
I think that's absolutely
Some sort of,
fair, because, I
yeah.
mean, it's, you know, that's gonna be something happening. You know, I think there's the objectively and looking at analytically, it's, you know, there's the danger of bias because it's a different council going to be making a decision. We don't want to like load the gun and hand it to them and say, this is what we're going to do, or this is what's kind of started, without giving them an opportunity to chime in on it. So I think that's the.
But we're not saying, I'm not saying for us to decide how it's gonna be done.
Agreed, but I think that by moving forward, somewhat predetermines, but it makes the implied suggestion by doing that. I'm not, you know, it's the, you know, that's, you know, because it's, you know, kind of stepping forward part of a process without that group having chimed in on that decision yet. So that's where it gets a little, it's starting to go a little
It's
fuzzy.
just putting the notice out there is what it is. And then say we'll be accepting applications after for just getting people to be thinking about it.
The application process is how long? What's the?
Took over,
We went,
6
we set up a 30-day process the last time around, so I think we actually, it was right before Halloween.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
didn't,
so- yeah.
3 of them didn't come in till the last 2 days.
Or no, it ended on Halloween. It started at
Yeah.
October 2nd
Yeah,
or 3rd.
yeah, so Councilmember Rowe's resignation was effective October 3rd. And it was, I think directly after that, we posted, you know, through the city's outlets, and then we posted in the Herald, and, you know, used as many ways as we could to get that word out and solicit applications. And it did close at the end of October, so October 31st. And then we proceeded from there to line up the interviews and go through the process.
it takes time to do all
That
that, yeah.
concluded with Mike being appointed, so, yep. In total, it was, what, about a month and a half?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's about 45 days.
Yep.
so it's not predetermining what the next council will do, it's preparing the idea of those who are interested, that they could apply, and then come January, first meeting or second meeting, then the council can decide, are we gonna take it as applications and do interviews, or are we just gonna go ahead and do a special?
I understand what the intent is, but, you know, then there's, you know, it's one of those things that's kind of like, it's kind of like starting something for somebody knowing that you're, you know, moving. And then it's like, okay, so where are we
I guess I
going?
don't agree with that.
So,
I'm looking more at
Yeah.
the benefit of the city not being, having the seat filled in a timely manner. And following the same process that we did for the other one and allowing the same time frame, without it being pushed out then months like a special election could be. So I disagree with you there. So that's it. Onward and upward.
I mean, unless there's, any sort, I'm not sure where to go from here unless there's a motion.
Somebody can make a motion.
Somebody could make a motion, to, go forth with what you're, asking, or we do nothing. So,
kind of said all along that I would really try to stay out of any of the decision-making for filling this spot. I didn't want to make it appear as though I was hand-choosing my successor, so I'll sit back and listen
Oh,
and
no,
discuss
yeah,
as questions
that's-
come, and yeah.
I don't see it.
Yeah.
I see it as the process.
Yep.
and Not deviating from the one we use for the other one, why would we do it different?
Yep.
And that it's the
And I
advance
Yep.
notice is all I'm
But
saying.
I think what we just did here is put out advance notice.
Yep.
Because it's gonna go.
That's fine. I just
Alex
wanted-
is gonna report it. I
She
can
was-
see her
She was
typing
typing quickly.
Oh, yes.
100 miles an hour
Are you
over there.
typing quick enough?
And,
The biggest thing was, there was no discussion after he gave his resignation. There was no
well, we didn't
discussion. It
know
wasn't
when the
out in
resignation
open.
was coming, so there, you're
Well,
right.
yeah, exactly, I know. That's
Yeah.
why I thought it would have been an agenda item instead of a other business, but anyway, I just wanted it out there that, so people start thinking about it.
Yep, and that's
And
part
not
of why I
delay the
gave it, is
process.
to get people to start to think about it.
Yes.
And as a bit of advice, I would say to everyone, serving on the city council is a fantastic experience, and I would hope that everyone will line up and we'll have dozens of people
Got to
interested.
be
That's
several
the
out of
goal.
1.3 million.
That's right.
Million.
Because I
So
think.
that's all I wanted to bring up, just because it
Okay.
wasn't discussed by the council after
true.
the announcement. So,
Okay.
that is it.
All right, anything further then, or we good? Okay. All right, with that, then we'll go ahead and move on. Item number 9, which is bills. Is there anyone that has a discussion or needs clarification? If not, I would entertain a motion to pay the bills.
Motion to pay the bills, Mr. Ryan?
I have a motion by Councilmember Geisler. Are you second?
I will second.
Second by Councilmember Wong to pay the bills. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Nate, will you call roll, please?
Yes, Councilmember Bo,
Yes.
Councilmember Wong.
Yes.
Councilmember Geisler.
Yes.
Mayor Winchell.
Yes. All right, moves us to other business. We're gonna let the new kids start out tonight.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Wong, you got anything for us?
Nope, nothing here.
That's why we put you in there.
There's a
Nothing
10-minute
else.
limit, but you can go up till then.
All right, how about Councilmember Bowl? We have one meeting left after
Yeah,
this.
well, absolutely. Just a couple of items. One is just, positive feedback, hometown holidays, the tree lighting in Fireman's Park on Saturday. Wonderful turnout, in spite of the fact that it was snowy and blowy, it was still a good turnout, and a lot of folks seem to be enjoying themselves. In particular, I thought the tree lighting on Saturday was fun to watch, in that it's becoming a family tradition already. People are there, and children and grandchildren, and enjoying the event, and going inside then to visit with Santa and have cookies, and it was just a fun family event, and really glad to see that turnaround. It's grown very quickly, and the tree lit up in its entirety on the first try, too. So that was
Unlike
fabulous.
last year.
Charlie
It's
Brown.
that new switch that,
Yeah.
If you want to know what 3 seconds, when 3 seconds feels like 30 minutes,
Oh, yeah.
have a tree not turn on when it's supposed to.
That's
that fancy flux capacitator anyways.
I think it was a team effort by the electric department.
Oh, see?
Andrew delivered it, but I don't know that he
Andrew
made it.
delivered it, but I think there was more hands-on.
Please send congratulations, that it works awesome.
And a big
I
thank
had
you.
people fighting to get it from me Sunday night. I had to fight to hang on to it. They wanted to
Yeah.
shut it off.
Protect that thing, because we need it next year.
Absolutely.
No, I gotta be responsible.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
I want the red light to light up
Free.
for recall.
I like that.
I worried that the lights are gonna start sliding off that tree because it's so droopy.
This one over here.
Talking about the
Yeah.
hometown holiday tree?
Yeah,
Keep the winds down.
it's like the further they go down, I'm afraid the lights will just slip right off.
And then I just had a call for 2 quick updates. Number one is the brewery update. I see progress going, windows coming in, things like that. And then I thought I would also ask for the Duncan update.
Yep. Actually, let's have Nate.
Okay.
They didn't blow it up when they hit the gas line. At least they didn't blow up the block.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
That was pretty
That was a
scary.
temporary little issue that got taken care of pretty quickly. On the brewery, they continue to proceed. It's still, what I hear is spring of next year
Okay.
is their objective to open. So that's what I know on that one.
Folks are interested.
Yeah, and they should be. I think it's gonna be a great project once it opens up.
Absolutely.
Up there, so.
So community interest is coming to a head, dare I say it, with a little beer humor there, but
Yeah.
people are very interested.
Well, and he's already out partnering with businesses too.
Yeah. Oh, fabulous.
So he's talking about partnerships with Red Bench
Yeah, he's
Bakery
talking
and with
Red
Dolce Vita. So I think what's gonna be sort of neat that comes out of this is some of the partnerships you're gonna see with businesses. You know, Andy providing fresh baked pretzels
yeah.
at the brewery. I mean, those types of things are what you sort of hope businesses can play off each other.
Yes. And the location obviously is key, and it's just another integral part of downtown, and it's fabulous.
And then, and I know that this isn't anything we're changing tomorrow, but will there be walking connection trails to that eventually?
Yes, yep.
But not probably in the next year or so, right? I mean, I'm not sure.
Well,
Would it have
I
to
think
go
what's
on
gonna end up,
61?
no, I think what's gonna end up happening is it's probably gonna end up being part of whatever development happens
Oh.
in the, what is that? Total loss.
Total loss, yeah.
Well, that's what I was
could
wondering,
drive
if that was gonna have to go up there, because then we've already kinda got trails there other than through there.
Yeah.
But that's locked up right now, so I don't know how that would,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, it'd be a combination of either that or improvements to 61 in time, but eventually I think, yeah. the
But
goal
that's
would
not
to have
gonna
that.
be real quick.
No, yeah, it'll be a number of years. And then on the Dunkin' Donuts, you asked about that. I know about probably what you do by driving by. You know, so the buildings are down, they're
Yep.
prepping the site, there's a lot of work being done. They have talked about the goal to start opening in spring of next year.
Okay.
I think a lot of that's gonna depend on how much progress
Weather.
they're able to make over the winter time here.
Absolutely.
And so that, you know, that exact date
Okay.
of the grand opening really hinges on that. So I know they're just as anxious to get open as
Oh,
anyone.
absolutely, as folks are interested in having them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very good. Meanwhile, the site looks a lot better than it used
Yes.
to.
Yep, and you'll continue to see improvements there, so.
Okay.
And, you know, form a code, as long as we're talking about projects going
Yeah.
on, they're continuing to move forward, and you're probably seeing some site prep work going on there. They're starting to work on foundation work.
Wonderful, good.
Things like that, so.
Just a great big piles of, is it
When will
snow
they start
from
tipping balls up?
other places? Or just from there?
The piles of stone that you see that's the aggregate that got removed from the
Concrete
site.
stuff,
And so
yeah.
they're hoping to use that as
Oh,
they need to
that's what's under
repave
that,
and-
okay.
and
I
build the
thought,
buildings.
snow that high?
Yep, so it's kind of
Okay.
nice they're able to recycle those.
So they'll move that
material.
eventually, yeah.
The mayor had a question.
And, yeah, when will walls go up? You know, I don't really know the timeline. I don't know if, Matt, if you've heard anything recently,
I mean,
specifically on that,
typically
but-
those types of projects end up taking about 8 to 10 months.
Yeah.
And so it's gonna happen sometime this winter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just, wondering, I know they were kinda on a fast track if they were able to order all that stuff and have that, because I know that prep time to get it in the food chain order there, that.
And those are tip-up panels, and
Right.
so,
They're
I mean,
precast, okay.
once the foundation goes down, those
Well,
will.
that's what I wondered, if that
It's
was gonna happen
amazingly quick
sooner
when
than
you put
later.
them up.
And they have ordered I know they've ordered the panels. In fact, I was out there last week and they had kind of a sample panel.
Yeah, they have the sample
off to
panel
the
sitting
side,
in there, I
so-
saw that
but,
already, so.
you know, it's pretty small to the actual scale of what it will be, so.
And then at the next meeting, we have a letter of intent potentially coming back for the rest of the
I was
site.
gonna ask, any progress on
Yeah.
lot 3 or
Really?
anything?
Yes.
Oh, that's good
Yep.
news.
Yeah,
That's
so,
pretty cool.
yeah, I think so. I mean, looking at some office condo type use there.
Nice.
It's good. I mean, you look at the areas that we've had those, I mean, they've created good paying jobs and
Yeah.
so, so it's sort of a combination of office condos and an industrial building too.
Right. Yep.
I was also happy to see the framing going up on the Aldi's
Oh.
Chipotle area shortly after we had just talked about at the meeting, saying that they had the paving down.
Yeah.
And it hadn't been framed yet. And I went by 2 days later, I think, and they were already framing it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that's gonna go pretty
Once
quick.
you get the foundation down, it goes
Yeah.
quick.
And then I'm sure they want to get the walls up so they can start doing the interior
That's
before the
right.
winter hits, yeah.
Yeah, before it gets any colder
Yep.
or wetter.
Yep. expect it to happen fast. Well, they want to open the spring, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I think they only open in April, because they want to be open 6 months before the holiday season. They need to get the kinks, because the biggest sales period they have is during the holiday season for any grocery stores, so they want to have all those kinks worked out before that.
Before,
I was thinking about Chipotle. It was like, really, they need to open
Not
6 months?
Chipotle.
I was like, how many burritos do you need to
Yeah,
make?
I know. No, we don't need any burritos during the holiday season.
Like a Christmas burrito.
Yeah.
and so talking grocery store, the last is, the questions all are still coming in, and that is, Hy-Vee still owns the lot, and we're assuming 2020, which is kind of what they told us all along, I think.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything different.
Okay.
I don't think it'll be next summer because Hy-Vee came out about a month and a half ago and announced in the Start Tribune the sites that they're gonna be working on next summer, and that was not one of them.
Being 2019.
2019.
And so,
Yeah.
so it's plausible, given what Hy-Vee's publicly stated, that it, you know, it would be at least one more year before they start.
Yeah. And that's a 12-month construction process
Oh,
at
yeah.
least, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Very good.
A filling the store takes 6
That's
months.
it? Okay. Councilmember Geisler?
Yep, just wanted to, if anybody hasn't seen it yet, there is going to be a Red Cross I can't talk tonight. Red Cross Bloodmobile Blood Drive at the Chaska Community Center on Wednesday, 12/19, and it's from 11 to 4. And I also saw that they're going to have another one on Monday, 12/17, from noon to 6 p.m. at the Chaska VFW. But either way, people can, the one on the 19th is the one done through the city, but they invite the public to also come. And you can go to redcrossblood.org and then search on our zip code, and it'll show the signups for those two blood drives. And also, just to remind everybody that the Boy Scout Troop 174, they're still selling Christmas trees out by Cub Foods. And they're doing 5 to 8 p.m. on weekdays and 9 to 9 on the weekends. So if you still need a Christmas tree, and I saw quite a few going out of there. Beautiful, too. Wow. Some are really nice. So that's all I have.
Okay, thanks. Matt, anything? Nate? Kevin? Tracy?
Tracy.
Bill?
Come on.
Sue? Tom? Steve? Yeah. I'm seeing things. I just, a couple things, that I wanna put in your ear about after the next meeting, or we're gonna do a little cake or something, and maybe go out afterwards for adult beverage, so we need to post that.
Yes, yep,
Okay,
yes, we'll put that on the agenda, that's,
I just don't want it to
Yeah.
get forgotten.
yeah.
So that way a few thousand people can join us for a beer.
Absolutely.
That's right, we have to invite everybody.
Well, he said, the City of Cover actually puts it on their agenda every meeting.
So,
What?
Yes,
yeah, Chan used to do it too,
yeah,
that they possibly
Seriously?
might go out afterwards.
yeah.
That way, they got everything covered.
No trouble.
Wow.
So.
Interesting.
All right, the only other thing that I can really think of, was I thought it was pretty cool when I was watching the football game was it last Sunday, and they come on and showed the Chaska Curling Center, so that was pretty neat.
That was a surprise.
That was, they had a private party there, and, so that, I thought that was pretty neat that they chose Chaska versus, St. Paul or even, the Blaine one, so.
Was that was Vikings and Packers, right? Wasn't it a border battle, sort of?
Yeah, it was,
little-
the Packers were like Vikings who played their whole career here but paid their last season at the Packers.
But yeah, that kind of caught me off guard too. was sitting there,
Because
was
I
like,
looked at
"What?"
the Packers legends, I'm like, I don't know if the Packers would get through these legends.
But that was a surprise.
I thought that was, and, I mean, he said at the Chaska Curling Center, so it was kinda nice, they were very clear about the name on it, so.
And they showed them all celebrating. At the
That is
end.
neat.
It was cute.
Yeah, that was another recognition for the
Yep.
Curling Center, so. The only other thing I have is, again, we're gonna be meeting here on the 17th is our next meeting.
And your birthday is when?
I don't know.
Yeah, I do.
Is it that night?
It's before our next meeting,
Yeah,
so we'll have to tip one to Mark for his birthday.
there we go.
All right, last call, if not,
Motion to adjourn.
all right, so I have a motion by Councilmember Bo,
I'll second that.
second by Councilmember Geisel to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? See you in 2 weeks. Have a good night.